All right, so I'm joined by Joel Rubin, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State. Joel, first and foremost, let's go back. Let's take a step back here. When you think of the deep causes of the crisis, the structural factors that underpin this conflict and how we got here, what comes to mind?
Nick, this is really the big picture question that Washington is grappling with right now, which is that Vladimir Putin now for a couple of decades has been aiming to reestablish and reassert Russian spheres of influence along his borders, along Russia's borders. And in many ways, for Putin, his mindset is that the greatest calamity that happened to Russia was the collapse of the Soviet Union. And so we're seeing that from his side. And from the European side, the Western side, we're seeing NATO that for decades has been a very strong alliance defending countries across Western Europe, looking in many ways towards Russia with reticence and fear. And that is all clashing now directly. We're even seeing on a recent basis now Finland wanting to jump into NATO, Sweden wanting to jump into NATO, and Putin, of course, looking at this in many ways as a long war for Russia. And that's what's really driving the current moment of the conflict.
That's right. Do you know that phrase that your future self is looking at you right now through the form of a memory? You know that phrase, right? It's kind of creepy to think about, but it's a phrase that I've heard again and again. And I want to think about the future and us looking back on this. And you mentioned spheres of influence, Joel. And I guess maybe not the conventional wisdom here in the United States, but what if someone were to say, well, how much is the West responsible here for this mess that we're seeing? I mean, the aim of the United States and its Western allies to peel Ukraine away from Russia's orbit, as you said, and incorporate it into the West to make Ukraine a Western bulwark on Russia's doorstep. Does that play into this? Will it, in the future, do you think, play into this at all when you try to make sense of all of this?
There have been a lot of moments since the end of the Cold War where we have seen decisions made by the United States and by the West about how far to expand NATO, how much to connect with Ukraine in this instance, over more than 3 decades now. And certainly some of those decisions have caused severe concern inside of Russia and have provoked nationalist backlash. And when it comes to Ukraine, Ukraine itself is only a very, very recent democracy. For many years, it was autocratic. It's been known for its corruption, notorious for its corruption. And we're seeing, and what's most tragic about this moment is we're seeing a government that is democratic, that has been wanting to move to the West, choosing to go there, elected by its people, now getting sucked back in. So the future self, looking at the current self, is seeing Ukrainians trying to get out of this grip from Russia to get to some freedom, get to some democracy, and being sucked back in while after this is done after decades of trying to find their footing. And so, I do think that there's a lot of blame to go around, without a doubt, about how we got to the moment that we're in. But it's very clear that at this moment, Russia is using brute force to try to control Ukrainian desires and the future as they see fit for their own country. And that's why we're in this moment of crisis.
Of course, they're using force, and in some ways, they're getting a taste of force as well. I mean, we were just talking earlier about the Russian cruiser missile ship that was sunk, the Moskva. And in some ways, it looks like, and that's just one example, that Russia is struggling here in its military operation, as it's calling it, but we know it's an invasion. But maybe we don't fully understand Russia's military operation and what it truly is. I mean, what if all these said woes are superficial, Joel? I mean, has Russia in some ways already won here? I mean, Russia doesn't want to conquer Ukraine, it says. What Putin is doing is maybe basically he's in the process of wrecking Ukraine. He's sending the message to the West, to the United States, to Europe to back off or continue to try to make Ukraine a Western bastion on our doorstep, and we'll just keep wrecking it. Do you think in some ways that could be Russia's goal? And if so, they're clearly succeeding there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a frightening thought, right? If we can't have it, you can't either. Right. Is sort of that mentality that Russia is leveling the country, bombing it from afar, bombing it from the sea. And so while the Moskva was destroyed, there are more Moskvas out there. And Russia has not even begun to tap into its population through conscription from its cities across the country. It's only used its current military, its current army. So The question is how far do they want to go? And Vladimir Putin has a very nasty track record in going very far, in destroying Grozny, and destroying Chechnya, destroying Georgia, destroying Syria. And I think that's what is so vexing for the West and for the United States and the Biden administration, is how to stop him from doing that. But no one's talking about going into Moscow to do this. So the question is he willing to allow for his army to get decimated and destroyed and thousands killed, as is currently happening, in order to destroy Ukraine, just to leave it in that destroyed phase? And that's why President Biden was right to use the word genocide the other day, and why President Zelensky is saying that this is a genocide and ethnic cleansing, because that seems to be Putin's goal. And that's this odd dynamic that we're in, which is it's diabolical in many ways. It's about destruction rather than about a limited military objective. He is really gaslighting the world and saying it's a special military operation. This is about completely leveling a country until it capitulates.
Well, Joel, thank you so much for coming on. I think there's so many headlines coming out every single day from Ukraine and Russia, and I think it's important sometimes to zoom out and kind of look at the bigger picture and look behind us as well. So, Joel Rubin, thank you for coming on the show and giving us that insight. Appreciate it.